Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. My name is Joel Harrison. I'm your host. In this podcast, we discuss all matters relating to, as the title suggests, trust and influence in B2B, which is a multifaceted, varied topic encompassing so much of what's going on and what's changing in a very, very exciting market right now. So for today's podcast, we're focusing on the center point or focal point of any B2B brand's digital experience, and that is its website, which is undoubtedly a powerful tool, but can be challenging to optimize with shifting buyer behavior and often differing perspectives on positioning and prioritization. So with me to talk through some of the challenges and opportunities for optimizing and humanizing B2B websites and the role of video and interactive experiences to align with profoundly shifting buyer behavior is Chris Wickson of ReelFlow. Chris is a serial entrepreneur in the B2B tech space with experience of building two pioneering MarTech firms from scratch and selling one to US parent and being part of that appropriate scale-up operation. So Chris, I'm delighted you could join us today. Welcome.
Good morning, Joel. Thanks for having me on. Excited to chat through things today.
Yeah, it's a really exciting topic, and sometimes we get obsessed with some of the kind of delivery channels. We don't think about that kind of focal point, that linchpin of everything. So great to talk about that today. So I know that you've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of research into the role of websites, and as buyers' behaviours change, specifically in response to use of AI for initial research. So what have you concluded from that? What's that led you to understand?
So I think it's a hill I'm willing to die on, that the marketing website in B2B will always be one of, if not the most important channel we have, the most important digital asset that we have. And I think the role of the website has to evolve to reflect the change in buyer landscape that we're operating in, as you alluded to. We know that AI is having a pretty big impact on how people are using the internet, how they're searching and researching. And I think going forward, our websites have got this sort of dual role to play. They are going to have to be the most up-to-date source of truth, with the most up-to-date information. So the models can access that and present people back with the right information. And then equally, when people do reach our websites, they have a much better experience than the one in most cases they have today. I think SEO over the last 5-10 years has forced us all to cram more and more content into our websites, but at the detriment of the visitor experience. And I don't think we can afford to continue to kind of build websites like we've always done in this changing landscape.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking beforehand about how before we started broadcasting, about how websites have become complex and everyone's got a vested interest in them, and they can be quite slow to develop and rebuild, and it can be quite political, can't it, to get things done and get things changed. So that inherently becomes a problem when the website kind of becomes more and more challenging to address, and consequently you lose the flexibility and the pragmatism, the dynamism which we're increasingly looking at these days. Is that fair?
It is, yeah. I think that the larger the organization, the more cumbersome and complex the website becomes. And with that, the more challenging it is to keep up to date and dynamic and who owns which parts. And I'm sure we've all been in projects that have ended up taking many, many months to update sections, or in many cases, the website has kind of ground to a halt because things just can't get improved or changed. However, I think that has to change and is changing. And like the impact of AI across everything right now in the tech space means that the barriers to do that should be becoming a lot lower. It should be a lot easier to dynamically update websites, keep them up to date and refreshed on a more constant basis than it just being a sort of once a year set and forget, and then we'll come back to it in 12 months' time.
That's some really good news. That's optimistic. I think one of the things you touched on earlier on as well, which I think is really important, and this actually predates ChatGTP, which is the launch of ChatGTP seems like that was the AI tipping point in my mind anyway. And one thing that we were seeing really strongly was just this push towards more simplistic buyer journeys. At its ultimate iteration, it was e-commerce, but for many companies, you can't sell a multi-million pound product via e-commerce, but what you can do is remove all the blocking points. And so I guess that people, there's this kind of polarity between websites being quite cumbersome and people just wanting, as in our consumer lives, we expect to get what we want really quickly and easily, and it be, if not a delightful experience, then at least a human experience that is we kind of intellectually and emotionally buy into what the organization's offering, and we see that they understand what we're doing and connect back to them. And I feel that's often absent in many websites that I go to these days.
Yeah, look, I'm sure, again, we've all landed on homepages and scroll up and down in those 4 or 5 seconds of attention we have and still don't quite know what that company does. So I think again, as we think about the future of websites, how do we make certainly those entry points so much more effective? How can we quickly help visitors to navigate to the right parts of the site for them, where the information is much more relevant to who they are, the persona they are, what they're looking for? I really think of websites evolving much more into a buyer enablement tool, as we're currently rebuilding ReelFlow.com, and with every page, I'm really trying to think through the lens, or look through the lens of our buyer. What are we trying to do here? How can we help them easily find the information they're looking for? How can we, if a visitor spends 30 seconds or 30 minutes on our site, make sure that by the time they leave and navigate back to their emails or Slack or the next tab along in their browser, they've learned something more about us. They're slightly more informed. They've hopefully got a better perception of our brand and who we are and the people behind it. And I think when you look through that lens, it does make you sort of question and challenge quite a lot of the sort of traditional ways we've been building websites.
Yeah, well, it's up for everything is up for grabs at the moment in B2B marketing, isn't it? Which is exciting, but a bit scary sometimes as well. So, and we touched this again earlier on. So, while overall website traffic may be declining, visitors who do arrive are likely to have higher intent to buy because they've done more of the research up front. So, how can businesses make the most of these higher value interactions?
Yeah, well, I think that we can already see that traffic is being redistributed. So, whilst perhaps the maybe vanity metrics of the past, where our blog content was picking up sort of long tail content was picking up higher volumes of traffic, we know that is perhaps being sort of sliced away as people increasingly start their search and research with AI tooling. But I would say the flip side of that means that by the time people do get to our website, hopefully there's a higher intent there. They're more on they're landing on our homepages, or perhaps deeper into our website immediately, and they're more informed. They're there for a reason. So I think, again, coming back to like the importance of the site, we have to capitalize on those visits. If buyers are there with that higher intent, again, can we give them a better experience? And in B2B, often that isn't, they're just force them to book a demo. They're there in their research mode. They might be on their phone on the train into London whilst they're researching. So again, can we just try and give them a much easier guided experience around the site so they can ultimately find the answers to what they're looking for?
Okay, and building on from that, I think one of the overriding trends from my perspective in B2B marketing over the last 5 or 6 years or so, and you see it across everything, is humanization. It kind of often crystallized by the great book by Paul Cash. I always give him a good plug because it is a good book. He's an old friend of mine. So why is establishing a human connection so crucial in B2B marketing, despite all our digital advancements? We are in a digital age, right? And the digital technology is advancing incredibly well, but the humanization is still at the core. Why is that?
Well, I think it's because of all the digital advancements that humanization and the importance of that human connection is more important than perhaps it's ever been. I saw a LinkedIn post, I think just yesterday, that led with like trust is at an all-time low in B2B, and the gap between buyers and sellers has never been wider. And I think whether you believe that or not, what we do know is I think we're seeing this sort of refocus on brands, on humanization. We know on our social channels, this sort of rise in short form, authentic talking head video, podcast style videos that we're doing now is really powerful, and it's cutting, and it is the activities that are cutting through. If I put a LinkedIn post out through the ReelFlow account, or I put a LinkedIn post out through my account, there will be a starkly different response to those two posts. So we know that trust and that human connection is incredibly important. And I think it also linked to this, again, part of this sort of changing B2B buyer landscape we're operating in now, that I had some stats noted down. 90% of deals are now won by a vendor that's on that shortlist on day one. Most buyers have already got preferred vendors in mind when they start a journey. So why is that? Well, it's a brand they are familiar with, maybe they've used before, they've already got that level of trust there. And I think, come back to the kind of human fundamentals of trust is largely driven by human interactions, right? It's why events are so I wouldn't say more popular than they've ever been, but, I think anybody who predicted the death of events during COVID was entirely wrong, right? Events are back and stronger than ever because people are kind of craving that human connection.
I mean, I think you've got a good case for events being stronger than ever. If you look at this event schedule this summer, it's just extraordinary. So, but yeah, I mean, so much great points in that. I mean, I think as someone who's got a background as a writer and a kind of a content creator using first of all print and digital, people want to polish text and have images and create beautifully crafted but perhaps cold material, but what do you think is lost when a prospect only interacts with text or image based content as good as it can possibly be? What do you think we lose from that?
I think the reality is people, for the most part, are not necessarily inclined to sit and scroll and read unless they're deeply like at a certain stage in their journey where they are willing to take that time. And there's still obviously a time and a place for sort of longer form written content, don't get me wrong. But I think in those short windows where we've got someone's attention and they're on our site, forcing them to scroll and read and try and navigate through shopping lists of tabs to try to find out, that piece of information is challenging. It's one of the reasons I think, as well as this sort of impact on traffic of AI, I think most companies I'm speaking to are also seeing a knock-on effect of declining time on site and increasing bounce rates, decline in pages viewed. So, conversely with that, what are we seeing? Increasing consumption. Well, it's short form video on social channels. People are spending their time and they are willing to watch. And I think there's another aspect to this around the sort of demographics of buyers today. We know younger generations are rising through the workforce, digitally sort of video native audiences who consume a lot of video content in their day-to-day lives, as we all do today.
Yeah, I mean, I lament it sometimes that there's a short attention span, and people are flick between channels, and I do it myself, so those shouldn't necessarily be too judgmental about that. But at the same time, when we get somewhere, we just expect in our consumer lives, we expect everything to work like Amazon, don't we? We expect to get to the answer and to the opportunity really fast. We don't have to wade through unnecessary and spurious or badly constructed architecture. So yeah, I think it's very, there's no time to mess around for anybody. I think the next thing I wanted to move to kind of everyone talk about was actually kind of relating to the kind of the core theme of this podcast, which is around trust, and particularly the role of video actually as a trust building tool. So what data points have you seen around how video impacts on engagement metrics on B2B websites? Because it creates a different kind of interaction, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we start more broadly, as we just touched on, there is this undeniable rise of video consumption more broadly in our day-to-day lives. I think last year, 80 to 90%, depending on which report you read, of the entire globe's traffic is video, and that continues to increase each year. And then I think from a B2B perspective, there's lots of great data points and research out there to sort of support the impact of video. And I do think it's important to say, when I'm talking about video here, I'm not talking about perhaps your traditional corporate video that I know probably everybody listening to this has probably been involved in some project in the last 10, 20 years that's cost a lot of money, 5-6 figures production, taken months to get right, and ends up with a 5-6 minute, corporate cheesy soundtrack, lots of people in suits around a shiny office, and it just gets embedded on a page, passive watching, and now it's quickly out of date and never watched again. I'm not talking about that type of like traditional long form video content. I think I'm talking about the content we're all consuming more on social, and there is that informative, impactful content. And I think within the ReelFlow product, we're helping companies sort of bring that type of video content to their websites with these sort of interactive experiences. And we're already seeing like some pretty great impact of that. More broadly, Google and LLMs, the sort of search through AI, really like video content, really prioritizes websites with video content, as long as they're set up in the right way, where the model or Google can kind of watch the video and see the content. It really prioritizes that. So that's one benefit from a sort of search and access perspective. And then within the ReelFlow early customer base, already seeing the opposite of what I talked about earlier. So bounce rates are declining. People are engaging with the ReelFlow videos. They're short form, they're interactive. So they're helping sort of navigate visitors deeper into the site, quickly get them to the right place they need to be. So bounce rates coming down, time on site's going up, number of pages, the sort of depth of visit is going up. And ultimately, with a slightly sort of curated journey, we can help get visitors from a homepage, where do I need to go, quickly deeper into a site, find the right information for them, land them on the sort of converting pages. And hopefully, as a byproduct of that, because it's more authentic, sort of talking head video content, they're getting a good feel for the people behind that business and the brand and that humanization we talked about.
Yeah, because authenticity is a kind of one of the component parts of trust, if that's possible to say. And as you say, it's how does seeing a real person from a company, as someone who is representative of whatever degree of that company, change the perception of the brand compared to just reading about them?
Yeah, well, I know we're going to come on to talk about the sort of impact of AI and video creation. So we'll put that to one side for a sec. But I think just in terms of seeing and hearing from real people at that business compared to just reading and scrolling, like we all know the barrier to entry in terms of spinning up a good looking website, despite what we said earlier, is lower than it's ever been. You know, you and I could sit here for the next half an hour and probably publish a pretty good looking corporate site that looks like we're a bigger operation than we actually are. So there is that barrier to entry to putting a good site out is low. So how do you sort of contrast that? Well, again, it's about bringing, I think, real people to the forefront, particularly in this era where trust has never been more important. And I think that this talking head authentic video content can play a really important role in that compared to just hoping they sort of scroll and read around the site.
I guess hearing it from the horse's mouth is what's really important. But some of those horses, the senior executives, haven't always been willing or prepared to be actively involved in any form of marketing, whether that's thought leadership at a kind of a really top line level or down on this point, where it's perhaps a bit more operationally focused. You know, it's dealing with a moment on a website. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a mixture of reasons there. Probably a combination of perhaps historic experience, as we talked about earlier, that we did some corporate video 10 years ago and it didn't seem to do anything for us, or it's just gathering dust on a YouTube channel and never watched before. So I think there's an element of maybe past performance. There is I think maybe certainly in larger organizations, perhaps underestimate of the importance of humanization and the role that video can play in that. You know, I operate in the sort of startup scale up world where a lot of the companies that we aspire to grow into, you know, they're founder led brands. Their founders are almost like one of their priorities is video, getting themselves out there on social, bringing themselves onto the website, sort of telling that story. We know the importance of storytelling in amongst all this, but I think maybe perhaps in larger organizations, perhaps there's a kind of underestimating the power of that, the buyer appetite for video.
Yeah, I feel like there's a generational shift of people who didn't feel comfortable in front of cameras, full stop, and that A, those people are possibly leaving the workplace. B, we're all just seeing it more in our work stream, and C, their behaviour is shifting up from the ground where, like it or not, the people in the workforce now who are digital natives are very much more likely to be comfortable on camera in whatever capacity. So we're all just becoming more media savvy, is the kind of how I'd say the shorthand of it all is.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah, and there's
Okay.
definitely more appetite for video creation we're certainly seeing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the C-suite. You know, it can be. We've got a few customers right now where in a lot of the videos it's more the subject matter expert, the product owner, the salesperson maybe. So there's lots of different opportunities for different types of people within a business to create video now.
I guess also that there was a perception that you can't ever be seen to mess up in that situation, whereas actually somewhat we've actually realised that actually, I'm not suggesting that people do that, but at the same time, being human and not necessarily presenting in the same way as a, I don't know, Hollywood actor is actually kind of a good thing, because you just look more relatable. So I feel like everyone's just kind of the message has dropped.
In the B2B marketing trends report that I know you're involved in, one of the things that really stuck out to me was that sort of anti-corporate creativity trend and theme. You know, we know this type of content it resonates with our audiences today.
Okay, yeah, it feels like that feels like it's the macro picture is humanization, and I feel like we're going in the right direction. We're not getting everything right as an industry, but that part is going in the right direction. So we've kind of painted the scene around the challenges people are facing at the moment, that power of humanization and the opportunity for a video to be part of that. How do you envisage the website experiences evolving beyond that kind of the traditional navigation that we know and understand, if not love, as a website that's been as they have existed up until this point and look like today?
I think if we fast forward 5 years, maybe even 3 years, I just can't see a world where we're still building sites like we do today. I touched on this earlier. I do think we're moving very quickly towards a place where this website has got to serve this dual purpose, as we talked about, the sort of source of training data for the LLMs, and then at the same time offering a much more immersive, personalized experience for visitors, potentially to each individual visitor, I would say. If you, again, coming back to that, sort of look at our websites as a buyer enablement tool, how can we help visitors to find the answers, find the information they're looking for, and then when they are ready to engage, I think we're going to move away from the sort of traditional where you just fill in a form and then someone's going to triage it and get back to you, or chat to the crappy chatbot that I'm sure we've all had bad experiences with chatbots of, certainly certainly in our consumer lives, let me speak to a human type thing. But I think we're actually going to see, and we're already starting to see some of this technology emerge of like, well, let's switch into genuinely useful live chat with an AI. And we're seeing this in customer support already. I don't know if you're familiar with Intercom. What they're doing with Fin, their AI product, is incredible, and the results are remarkable compared to human support agents. Fin is faster, more knowledgeable, answers tickets quicker, successful tickets dramatically compared to humans. So that's happening on the support side, and I think it's inevitable that is going to find its way into our marketing websites. So, I think there's a world, we're not too far away from you land on a site and you're really getting a mixture of kind of immersive, interactive video that's helping you navigate when you're not quite ready to engage yet, but there's someone there kind of helping you get around the site. And then when you are ready to engage, rather than just a traditional form, you can then move into sort of a more qualifying type conversation. Again, get the answers you need with a very well-trained AI. And then all about I was chatting to a CMO last week and she was saying, ultimately, by the time my sellers are ready to speak to that buyer, hopefully that buyer is incredibly well informed. Hopefully it's just a tap in. They're already at the stage of like, right, I am now ready to speak to you because I'm kind of ready to buy and you're one of my two chosen vendors. So we're straight into a sales cycle. So I think that the website is going to play that increasingly important role of getting buyers closer and closer to the point when they're ready to get into a sales cycle.
I was thinking that sounds really compelling, and I don't know. I know Intercom. I don't know enough about what it is they do. I know about their great advertising, but isn't it an interesting paradox though that AI isn't going to allow brands to be more human, right? That's a really fascinating paradox, but it allows, ultimately it's giving buyers what they want faster and allowing them to get to what they need to in a more productive way and ultimately have a better experience, and even if they don't buy anything, to feel better about that organization they've engaged with.
Yeah, it is definitely going to be interesting to see how this emerges. I think the human aspects of this, we're just going to have to surround, if AI is that, there's no going back now. The horse is bolted. We've got to go with the tide. This is happening. So then it's going to have to be, well, how creative can we be? And then we come back to the things talked about earlier, like the importance of brand and the activities we're doing and that human touch we can add to the website when someone is ready to engage with us. We are there to help them. But just that, I think that middle part is where AI can really be the enabler that sort of, again, help a buyer sort of accelerate through their journey to the point when they are ready to have a human interaction with us.
Okay, so for companies who are starting to think about enhanced video experiences, what's a good first step on that journey?
Well, I think we touched on it earlier, the barrier to creating video has never been lower. Like, we've all got pretty good webcams on our laptops these days, and we've certainly got amazing camera technology on our mobile phones. So the ability to just record good enough looking content is there. And with not a lot of tech and tooling, you can actually create a pretty good setup, as we've both got, at home now, and most people have. So it's quite easy to create video content. And then in terms of editing and production, again, in the same way, perhaps like creatives a few years ago was you needed expensive Adobe suites and stacks of software. Well, now I can spend $20 a month on some pretty powerful video editing software. So it's certainly easy to get started. And then when I think from a website perspective, or certainly a B2B perspective, we know video is powerful on social, and we see a lot of companies who are already doing good video content on social channels. But I think I would be like, don't stop there. The amount of sites I go up, companies or brands I see that are creating this video content we're talking about, then you land on their website, which is the natural next place. If something piques my interest on LinkedIn, or if someone gets my attention, like most people do, I'm probably going to go and have a poke around on the website and just start to build up my picture. Don't just stop on social. I think we've got to think about how do we bring that type of video onto a website. And then the final point would just be starting to think about, again, as we think about website design through the lens of the buyer, the visitor, what journeys are we actually trying to do here? How are we trying to help people sort of navigate around the site and get to the information they're looking for? There's a great product called Story Lane, which is an interactive product demo platform. And they've seen incredible growth over the last few years. They're very much a similar like mindset to us around ungated content. Don't force me to book a 45-minute demo. Just let me see and poke around the product in a few minutes to really decide if this is the right thing for me. And I think the website has got to take that broader view, let people navigate and interact as easily as we can. And I think video can play a good sort of role in that.
Yeah, it feels like it just can bring some stuff forward, and then at the same time make the brand relatable. We started this by talking about that there are their integration issues or website development issues can have historically been problematic, and you made a very good point that they don't have to be, and increasingly they're not for smaller businesses, but for larger companies, I expect that some of that does still apply. So, what integration challenges should companies anticipate when adding video overlays to their websites? What do they going to have to get over to get to do this?
Well, without this turning into sort of a picture ReelFlow, we have built the product to complement an existing website. So to add our overlay player, which sort of sits and sort of floats on top of a site wherever is appropriate, it literally requires a single line of code. So it doesn't require like major website development. I think it's one of the reasons we've been able to get some early traction quite quickly is this isn't part of a big website rebuild project. You can very quickly add a sort of overlay type video, as I say, single line of code that just gets dropped into the head of the website. And then from there, things can be published on any pages. So very easy to add. We do have a sort of inline embedded version of the player as well, the interactive player. That does require a little more development, but again, not simple, kind of single line of code into a container on a page. So it is, again, easier than it has been traditionally to, I think, bring video to a site.
And what are the results that like from it? Or how do you what do you see? I guess you get a lot of data from in terms of video interactions and plays and stuff like that.
Yeah, when we were sort of working on the early idea, our hypothesis for ReelFlow last year was, do we think audiences today want to and will interact with short form talking head video content like they do on social, but on a website? Well, the answer like resoundingly is yes. We know, certainly compared to like interacting with a chatbot, not that we're trying to position ReelFlow as a better chatbot, but often our overlay player might occupy that same real estate on the page. But we're already seeing if chatbots get a 1 to 2% interaction rate in B2B, yeah, we're seeing some sites get like 20, 30, 40% interaction with the sort of talking head player. I think there's sort of an intrigue of like, okay, what is this? Someone going to sort of chat to me, or I'm going to, and we're increasingly familiar with that sort of portrait style talking head as we see on social. So we're seeing some great early interaction and engagement with the player. And then because the videos are short form, 30 to 60 seconds, we're generally seeing pretty strong watch times through those videos. And then the interactive aspects to it, whether that's sort of just signposting somebody deeper into the site or helping learn a bit more about them before taking them to a different part of the site or explaining something to them, we are seeing that is having a pretty good impact on time on site, pages viewed, all trending in the right direction. Ultimately, the sort of flows, why it's called ReelFlow, we're trying to flow a visitor to the right part of the site. If the flow ends on a converting page, we're already seeing we can get visitors to those converting pages. Not that it's purely about conversion, because clearly like in B2B, we know what 97% of our website traffic are not there on our sites to book a demo or speak to somebody. They're just there in their research journey. So that's why this sort of engagement piece, I think, is so important that we're seeing.
So, Chris, I think one aspect of this conversation which you really can't ignore is the role of AI avatars in the provision of video overlays, or indeed any aspects of website development. How do you feel which is not some people have expressed concerns about this. How do you feel that audiences are responding to these things and in terms of their use in websites?
Yeah, we can't deny this technology is here now. And as my co-founder Andy often says to me, today it is the worst and the most expensive it's ever going to be. And it's already pretty incredible what can be done and relatively inexpensive to do. And the quality continues to go up. Even in the last 6 months that we've been playing with these tools and using them, like it's dramatically improving and the cost is coming down, almost to the point where I think this technology is just going to become commoditized at the sort of infrastructure layer. So with that in mind, yeah, again, like we talked about earlier, I think we have to go with the tide here. But then we are into this interesting, we've talked a lot about trust and authenticity. So my ability to quickly spin up a very realistic looking version of me saying whatever I've asked it, the sort of talking head to say, it is very easy to do now. But I think this is the reality of the world we're operating in. And I sort of think that we're trying to strike the right balance in how we use this and how our customers are using this through ReelFlow, in that the person in the video is genuinely me. This is a trained on my likeness. This is using existing footage. The audio could either be, this is me actually speaking. I'm just not sat in front of the camera. I'm just recording my audio, and then we're just overlaying that audio onto my talking head. So then it's like, well, they're my words, and I'm speaking, and that is me in the video. They just weren't done at exactly that same time. Or the text to audio, which again is pretty incredible how quick that technology is improving. So we can generate a script and then generate a very realistic sounding version of my voice saying those words. To some extent, is that no different to a marketing team generating copy for their C-suite to say at an event, potentially? So I think that, like, as we said earlier, the horse is bolted here, and this technology is here now. And like everything with AI, I think this just becomes another enabler. If we talked earlier about like reluctance of C-suite to get on camera, well, what if the ask to the C-suite was like, well, I only need a few minutes of you talking about what you had for breakfast and what you're doing today, and that's good enough. We can then use that to create good looking content. But I think there has to be a transparency around this, and I think the brands that will succeed here will be increasingly transparent about how they're using this, where they're using this. We're looking at how can we potentially bring like watermarks into the ReelFlow player, so this is a true video, maybe this is a genuine video but it has been edited with AI, all the way down to this is a AI avatar that is a person that does not exist and a voice that has been created with AI. There's a spectrum there of using this technology.
That's really interesting. I think it's fascinating how it's evolving, and we're seeing the technology is evolving in parallel with human attitudes to it. I guess I guess it sounds like a certain extent is we're probably going to just get used to this. We're already going to become more comfortable over time. Maybe we won't, but we're probably going to do that. But we are in an era right now where marketing budget is under pressure. Everyone's time is under pressure. And if you're given an opportunity to do something which gets a result faster, that's going to sound quite compelling to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a time and a place for it. There's certain formats where it absolutely makes sense for it to be two humans talking naturally like we are now. But then I think there's other circumstances where, like at the other end of the spectrum in the customer support world, where the visitor or user to some extent doesn't care who's telling them the information. They just want to consume it in that short form video content. Then yeah, that's a time and a place for that. And I think there's a sweet spot in the middle, as you said, around enabling and streamlining and making it a lot easier to bring good sounding, good looking short form video to the site that still maintains an element of that authenticity. It's still a real person at that business. That's still their voice. It's just been created quickly at scale.
It's a fascinating topic. Thanks. Fantastic. So this is really helpful and really great to understand more about what it is you're doing, but more to the point around this fascinating inception point in B2B marketing where we know we need to be more human. We know the buyers are increasingly, shall we say, wanting to get a result faster, but at the same time AI is coming in and we've got to utilize it. So it feels like a kind of an inception point of lots of different things and an opportunity to do something differently, but also not to be a kind of a something that needs a massively traumatic in terms of integration or overlaying. So it's a great opportunity and a great product. So Chris, thank you very much for coming and talk to us about it today. I think it's been a really great conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and looking forward to hearing more about how ReelFlow develops and all the stuff that you're going to be doing.
Sure, it's been good fun. Thanks for having me on.
Great stuff. If you've enjoyed this podcast and talking about the role of trust and humanization, authenticity in B2B marketing, which is an emerging, evolving topic and really, really pressing at the center of everything. There's loads more episodes like this. Please don't hesitate to give us a like and to subscribe. We'd love to hear you listening to more of these episodes with CMOs and pioneers and thought leaders in this area. But from now, for me, thanks for listening and goodbye.